In a small, quiet town in Oklahoma, the heartbreaking story of Kelsey Shelton Smith Briggs unfolded, a tale that would expose chilling secrets, devastating betrayals, and the tragic failures of a system meant to protect the innocent. Behind her bright smile and joyful spirit lay a life marked by unimaginable suffering and a web of deceit that stunned the nation. What really happened to Kelsey? Who can be trusted in a story where love, control, and revenge collide? Stay with us as we unravel the haunting details of a case that shook the very foundation of justice. Kelsey Shelton Smith Briggs was born on December 28, 2002, a beacon of innocence amidst the turmoil of her parents' fractured relationship. Her mother, Ray Smith, and father, Lance Briggs, had divorced before her birth, leaving questions about her paternity. During their separation, Ray had been involved with another man, and it wasn't until Kelsey was 3 months old that a paternity test confirmed Lance as her biological father. This acknowledgement did little to mend the fractured family. Lance showed little interest in his daughter, and his family, led by his mother, Cathy Briggs, quickly began to assert control, insisting that Kelsey take the Briggs surname. However, beyond this superficial act, neither Lance nor his family made meaningful efforts to connect with or support the child in her early months. Ray and Lance's relationship had once been the story of young love. High school sweethearts, they rekindled their connection years later, leading to their marriage in 2000. However, their union soon descended into darkness as Lance's drug addiction and violent behavior came to light. Ray endured frequent physical abuse, bearing visible signs of Lance's anger, such as black eyes, bruised ribs, and pulled hair. The violence was unrelenting, culminating in a devastating blow that caused Ray to suffer a miscarriage during her first pregnancy. Despite her efforts to leave, including filing for divorce and returning to her parents' home, Lance's manipulative actions, such as breaking into their shared home and leaving threatening messages, kept Ray trapped in an abusive cycle for years. Looming over this chaotic relationship was Cathy Briggs, Lance's mother, whose manipulative and controlling nature would play a pivotal role in Kelsey's life. Cathy Briggs, Kelsey Shelton Smith Briggs' paternal grandmother, had a life marked by tumult and controversy long before Kelsey's birth. Her personal history was rife with troubling incidents, manipulative behavior, and unresolved questions that raised doubts about her character and motivations. In the 1970s, Cathy became a mother at a young age. At just 17 years old, she had her first child, Shreya, followed by her second, Gina, a year later. These early years were marked by instability. Cathy's relationship with her children's father, Kevin Robinson, was tumultuous and fraught with conflict. Despite the tension, Cathy and Kevin married in 1907, but the union was short-lived and ended in divorce just 2 years later. Shortly after the divorce in 1979, Kevin Robinson died under suspicious circumstances. Officially, his death was ruled a suicide by gunshot, and Cathy claimed that his inability to see his children due to custody disputes had driven him to despair. However, her behavior following Kevin's death cast doubt on this narrative. Instead of providing care for her children, Cathy took them to the courthouse and threatened to kill them if the state didn't take custody. This shocking outburst resulted in the Department of Human Services, DHS, stepping in, and Cathy rarely visited her children afterward, opting to focus on her own life. During the years following Kevin's death, Cathy was known for prioritizing her social life, often choosing to party and socialize rather than care for her children. Her apparent indifference to motherhood during this period further strained her relationships with her children, who were left in the care of the state. Eventually, Cathy met and married Royce Briggs, who became a stabilizing figure in her life. Together, they regained custody of her children, and Royce's name was adopted by her son, Lance Briggs, who later became Kelsey's father. However, even with Royce's presence, Cathy's reputation for controlling and manipulative behavior persisted, especially when it came to her children and later, her granddaughter. Cathy's history of controlling and erratic actions followed her into her later years. Her influence over her children, particularly Lance, was seen as domineering. When Lance began a tumultuous relationship with Ray Smith, Cathy's attempts to intervene and control the situation were relentless. Her actions frequently involved spreading rumors, filing false reports, and using her forceful personality to steer outcomes in her favor. Cathy's involvement in Lance's relationships often escalated conflict, creating a toxic environment that would later spill over into Kelsey's life. When Lance remarried in 2003, Cathy enlisted her new daughter-in-law to further her campaign against Ray. The harassment escalated, with Cathy stalking Ray, following her to work and school, and even making false police reports, such as claiming Ray was driving recklessly when no such behavior occurred. Cathy's obsessive interference created an environment of constant fear and conflict, forcing Ray into an uphill battle to protect her daughter. Amidst this toxic family dynamic, Kelsey's life became a battlefield, her innocence overshadowed by the manipulative and violent forces around her. The seeds of tragedy were planted early, as Cathy's relentless pursuit of custody and control over Kelsey set the stage for the devastating events to come. By 2005, Kelsey's safety and well-being began to deteriorate. In January of that year, she suffered a broken collarbone, which was attributed to her falling out of her crib. However, this incident raised suspicions and gave Cathy an opportunity to act. Claiming Ray was neglecting her child, Cathy successfully gained temporary custody of Kelsey. What should have been a moment of relief for Cathy became the beginning of Kelsey's darkest period. While under Cathy's care, Kelsey's health rapidly declined. She lost weight, her hair began to fall out, and her once bright demeanor dimmed. These alarming signs went largely unaddressed by those around her, as Cathy's focus remained on keeping Kelsey away from Ray. The custody battle intensified, leaving Kelsey caught in the crossfire of a deeply toxic family feud. This series of events not only foreshadowed the tragedy to come, but also exposed the failure of the systems meant to protect Kelsey. As the conflict escalated, the little girl at its center suffered the most, with her innocence and safety ignored in the pursuit of control and revenge. The events of October 11, 2005, marked the darkest day in the short life of Kelsey Shelton Smith Briggs. That afternoon, her mother, Ray Smith, left their home to run a few errands, believing her daughter was safe under the care of her boyfriend, Michael Porter. Kelsey, who had been napping in her bed when Ray departed, was left in what should have been a secure environment. Ray planned to be gone for no more than an hour, intending to pick up her stepdaughter from school and collect therapy documents for Kelsey at the post office. However, upon returning home, Ray was met with a scene of chaos that would haunt her forever. Paramedics and an ambulance were parked outside her house, their lights flashing ominously. Ray's mother, Gayla, stood on the porch, her face a mix of sorrow and dread. Desperately, Ray demanded to know what had happened. Gayla explained that Michael had called her, claiming Kelsey had experienced a seizure while sleeping. Inside, the paramedics were working frantically to revive Kelsey, who appeared unresponsive. Ray watched in stunned silence as they prepared to transport her daughter to the hospital. At the emergency room, doctors continued their efforts to save Kelsey, but their attempts proved futile. At exactly 4:45 p.m., the little girl was pronounced dead. Ray, overwhelmed with grief and disbelief, entered the room where Kelsey lay lifeless. She picked up her daughter's small, fragile body, cradling her in her arms, and sobbed uncontrollably. Through her tears, she whispered, "Why did God take my child?" In the hours that followed, Michael Porter's behavior raised suspicions. As the hospital staff discussed the autopsy procedures, Michael appeared agitated, blurting out, "They're not going to cut her open, are they?" This strange outburst was followed by 2 episodes where Michael feigned heart attacks and fainted, drawing attention away from the tragedy at hand. The autopsy results, however, revealed the horrifying truth. Kelsey had died from blunt force trauma to her abdomen, an injury so severe that it caused her internal organs to fail. This wasn't the result of a fall or accident, it was the result of deliberate violence. What made the findings even more appalling was the discovery of evidence pointing to repeated sexual abuse. Investigators found signs that Kelsey had suffered ongoing abuse over a period of time, likely during her stays with the Briggs family and while under Michael Porter's care. Further examination of Michael's personal belongings added another layer of horror. Authorities found photos and videos of young children on his computer, implicating him in disturbing acts of exploitation. The discovery painted a chilling picture of a man who had not only harmed Kelsey physically, but also subjected her to unthinkable abuse. Kelsey's injuries, combined with the prior abuse allegations during her time in the Briggs household, revealed a pattern of escalating violence and neglect. Her broken collarbone, fractured legs, and signs of malnourishment earlier that year had been ignored or dismissed, allowing the cycle of abuse to continue unchecked. As the investigation unfolded, it became clear that Kelsey had suffered immensely in the months leading up to her death. The tragedy was not only the loss of an innocent child, but also a damning indictment of the failures of those who were supposed to protect her. This wasn't just a case of one man's cruelty. It was a collective failure of a system that had failed to intervene when Kelsey needed it most. The events of that day left a lasting scar on all who knew Kelsey, while the revelations that followed cast a shadow over everyone involved, exposing a level of suffering no child should ever endure. As the investigation progressed, Cathy Briggs, Kelsey's paternal grandmother, seized the moment to further her own agenda. Cathy immediately called her son, Lance Briggs, who was in rehabilitation at Fort Benning, Georgia, to inform him of Kelsey's death. Within hours, Cathy began spreading misinformation, accusing Ray Smith of being responsible for Kelsey's murder. She claimed that Ray had abused Kelsey, painting her as the villain in the unfolding tragedy. Using her influence in a website she created called Kelsey's Purpose, Cathy launched a campaign to sway public opinion against Ray. She twisted the narrative to place all blame on Ray, framing her as an unfit mother who had allowed Kelsey to suffer, despite mounting evidence that the abuse had occurred under Michael Porter's care and during Kelsey's time in the Briggs household. Cathy's actions not only deepened the rift between the Smith and Briggs families, but also complicated the investigation. Her ability to manipulate public perception created a whirlwind of conflicting stories, distracting from the truth and allowing the real culprits to shift blame. The discoveries in the investigation painted a horrifying picture. Kelsey had lived a short life filled with love from her mother, but overshadowed by abuse and neglect at the hands of others. The autopsy and subsequent findings confirmed that her death was not an isolated incident, but the tragic result of months of unchecked cruelty. Despite these revelations, Cathy's manipulations and the deep-seated family conflicts threatened to obscure justice, creating a narrative that vilified Ray, while the true perpetrators worked to cover their tracks. The investigation became a battleground, not just for the truth about Kelsey's death, but for control over her memory and legacy. The pursuit of justice for Kelsey Shelton Smith Briggs was as heartbreaking as it was controversial, exposing cracks in the legal system and igniting widespread public outrage. After the investigation concluded, Michael Porter, Ray Smith's boyfriend and the last person to see Kelsey alive, was charged with her murder. The evidence against him was overwhelming. Kelsey's autopsy revealed the horrifying truth of blunt force trauma to her abdomen, which caused her death, and evidence of prolonged sexual abuse. Additionally, incriminating materials found on Porter's computer linked him directly to acts of child exploitation. Rather than face a trial, Porter pleaded guilty to second-degree murder, a move seen by many as a way to avoid the harsher penalties of a first-degree murder on conviction. He was sentenced to 30 years in prison, a term that some felt did not fully reflect the magnitude of his crimes. The courtroom was filled with tension as the plea agreement was finalized. Porter showed little emotion, but the weight of his actions reverberated in the room. However, what followed shocked everyone involved. Despite not being present at the time of Kelsey's death, Ray Smith, Kelsey's mother, was also charged. The prosecution argued that Ray had enabled child abuse by leaving Kelsey in Porter's care, despite alleged warning signs of his abusive tendencies. The court contended that Ray had failed in her duty to protect Kelsey, a claim that ignored the context of Ray's life. A woman navigating years of harassment from the Briggs family, multiple custody battles, and the challenges of rebuilding her life while ensuring Kelsey's safety. In a decision that stunned the public, Ray was convicted and sentenced to 27 years in prison, just 3 years shy of Porter's sentence. The verdict left many questioning the fairness of the judicial system, as it seemed to punish a grieving mother who had done everything in her power to shield her daughter. Ray had attended therapy, fought to regain custody of Kelsey from Cathy Briggs, and worked tirelessly to provide a stable life for her child. Yet the court's ruling portrayed her as complicit in Kelsey's suffering, even though the abuse largely occurred when Kelsey was in the Briggs household or under Michael Porter's care. The courtroom erupted with mixed reactions. On one side, supporters of Cathy Briggs applauded the decision, citing it as justice for Kelsey. On the other side, advocates for Ray were devastated, calling the verdict a gross miscarriage of justice. Among Ray's supporters were those who believed that Cathy's manipulation and smear campaign had heavily influenced the narrative. Cathy had created a website called Kelsey's Purpose, which she used to accuse Ray of neglect and abuse, ignoring the role her own family played in Kelsey's injuries. Public backlash to Ray's conviction was swift and vocal. Advocacy groups, journalists, and individuals sympathetic to her plight raised serious concerns about the fairness of her trial. They pointed out the judicial system's failure to investigate the Briggs family's involvement in Kelsey's abuse, particularly during the periods when they had custody. Many believed that Ray had become a scapegoat, punished for a crime committed by Porter and facilitated by systemic failures in child protective services. The injustice of Ray's conviction brought her case to the forefront of public discourse, highlighting the challenges mothers face in protecting their children from abusive environments, especially when caught in toxic custody battles. People question how a system designed to protect children could allow Kelsey's suffering to go unnoticed, only to punish her mother after her death. For many, Ray became a symbol of a flawed system, one that could not distinguish between victims and perpetrators. Her story raised difficult questions about accountability, manipulation, and the biases that can arise in family conflicts. The fight for justice for Kelsey did not end with the convictions of Porter and Ray. Instead, it sparked a movement for legal reforms and a call to re-examine the broader circumstances of the case. In the aftermath, Ray's supporters vowed to continue fighting for her freedom, believing that her love for Kelsey and her efforts to protect her had been ignored by a judicial system focused on assigning blame. Meanwhile, Cathy Briggs remained unapologetic, continuing to push her narrative of Ray's culpability, even as doubts about her motives and actions during Kelsey's life began to grow. The tragedy of Kelsey's death and the ensuing legal battles left a scar on everyone involved, but it also served as a chilling reminder of the cost of systemic failures and misplaced blame. For Kelsey, who had endured so much in her short life, the pursuit of justice remained as complex and painful as the circumstances that led to her untimely death. In the wake of her passing, Kelsey's legacy spurred new programs and advocacy initiatives aimed at preventing similar tragedies. Her case became a rallying cry for lawmakers, social workers, and communities to prioritize the safety of children over procedural failures and to hold abusers accountable. Candlelight vigils, advocacy campaigns, and public discussions kept Kelsey's memory alive, pushing for reforms to ensure that no other child would suffer as she did. One of the most significant aspects of her legacy was the call for improved policies surrounding child protection. Advocacy groups highlighted the need for more rigorous oversight of custody arrangements, better training for social workers to recognize signs of abuse, and stronger intervention protocols in cases involving domestic violence. Although Kelsey Shelton Smith Briggs' life was tragically short, it was filled with moments of love and joy that touched the hearts of those around her. Her bright smile, her love for drawing, and the way she cherished time with her mother left an unforgettable impact. Despite the turmoil she endured, Kelsey's innocent spirit remains a symbol of hope and resilience. Each year on her birthday and the anniversary of her death, friends, family, and advocates gather to honor her memory. They light candles, release balloons into the sky, and share stories of her vibrant, loving personality. These gatherings serve not only as a tribute to Kelsey, but as a reminder of the ongoing fight for justice and reform in her name. If Kelsey's story has moved you, don't let it end here. Join us in raising awareness and advocating for justice by subscribing to our channel. Hit the notification bell so you never miss a story that matters. Together we can shine a light on the truth, support reform, and fight for a safer future for every child. Your support helps us continue to share these important stories. Thank you for being part of this mission.